Have you been invited to an IEP meeting? Are you a little unsure about what's going to happen there? No worries! Stick with me and you're going to look like you've been doing these meetings for years. You're going to come out feeling like you've been helpful, and because you've participated fully, the student is going to be in a better situation too. I'll see you on the other side of the logo and we'll get started. Okay then, thanks for coming back to my Teaching Coach channel. I really appreciate the support, and I'm so glad that I'm able to keep spreading my message about helping new and intermediate teachers grow in their competence, advocacy skills, and their commitment to justice. IEP meetings are the perfect place where all three of these skills come together in a powerful way. Let me set up a little context about IEPs and IEP meetings. IEP stands for Individualized Education Program. And the most important thing for you to know that an IEP is a legally binding contract between the school district and the family of a child with a disability. An IEP meeting is very different from a parent-teacher conference in that what happens in this meeting becomes legally enforceable through layer upon layer of administrative and judicial proceedings. The results of some IEP meetings have even ended up at the Supreme Court. But don't worry. The special education teacher you're working with has been trained in the law and is backed up by people in your district to keep any situations from rising to that level. The vast majority of IEP meetings are friendly and productive, and by following my advice, you'll be doing your part to keep any meetings you're involved in friendly and productive too. Every student who receives special education services must have at least one IEP meeting per year to review the progress they've made over the past year and to set goals and services for the next year. The team that does this is determined by special education law, and you are filling a role on that team for which your attendance is legally required. General education teachers know the curriculum that's being taught to students who are working on grade level skills. And they know the state standards in their subject areas better than anyone else does. General education teachers also know the behavioral expectations that typically developing students are held to across the school. Special education teachers may know those things if they're exposed to general ed settings enough, but not all special ed teachers get that exposure. So the law requires gen ed teachers to attend meetings to help set the expectations for student achievement for the rest of the IEP team. Other members of the team that are required to attend are, of course, the parent or parents of the student with disabilities and the special education teacher. The other legally required attendees can get a little technical. Generally, a principal or some other district representative has to come. This person is someone who, quote, is qualified to provide or supervise the provision of specially designed instruction to meet the unique needs of children with disabilities, is knowledgeable about the general education curriculum, and is knowledgeable about the availability of resources of the local education agency, unquote. Also, there has to be someone who can interpret any evaluation results, but this likely will be the special education teacher, but it might also be a school psychologist. And finally, anyone else can be invited with knowledge or special expertise about the child. Whenever it's appropriate, the child with a disability is also welcome to attend. So, 4 people is about the minimum number of people that will be in the meeting, but for a child with severe disabilities or for a situation in which lawyers are involved, there can be up to 20 or more people at one of these meetings. All IEPs must have the following parts, and it's very typical that the meeting agenda will be built around reviewing and updating these 8 items. First is the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. This includes how the child's disability affects their involvement and progress in the general education curriculum. This is where you're going to be asked to contribute quite a bit. I'll give you specific details about what to prepare further on in the video, but you'll want to talk about how the student is doing in general education, where they struggle and where they shine, what supports they're using and what supports they might still need. The second big thing in this meeting is measurable annual goals. The goals are written in a very specific way so that it's clear legally whether the student met them or not. Share your thoughts on whether the goals place too high or too low of an expectation on the student. Third is a statement on how progress on those goals will be reported. The special education teacher will handle this. They don't really have much to say on what they want to add in here, as they'll have to create progress reports on the goals from the IEP at the same time that students in general education get report cards. Fourth, the special education and related services and supplementary aids and services and program modifications or supports for school personnel. That was quite a mouthful, but this is the page that outlines all of the special services and accommodations and modifications that the student will get because of their participation in the special ed program. Now, pay close attention to these, because these are the things that you may have to provide in your classroom for the student, or it could be shifting around some of the personnel already employed to meet these newly identified needs for the student about whom you're meeting. Rarely, the supports could also include equipment or technology that the special education department would pay for that might have a benefit for all the students in your class, like maybe microphones or amplifiers. Fifth is an explanation of how much and why the child will be separated from their non-disabled peers. Special education law is very explicit about how it wants to minimize how much students with disabilities are kept away from their non-disabled peers. So if you think you can find ways to keep the student in your class more, please suggest them. Number 6 is a section on participation in district-wide assessment. The IEP determines to what extent students with disabilities have to participate in standardized testing. Even though standardized testing can be difficult for students with disabilities, there are still incentives for districts to not remove them from testing completely, so the team must determine what accommodations are necessary for the student to still participate. 7th is the start date, frequency, location, and duration of any services and modifications that the IEP mandates. Remember that I said earlier that the IEP was a legally binding contract? This is more proof of that. This outlines all of those sticky details. And finally, the 8th thing that we will go over in the IEP meeting is a statement of what services the student will receive when they turn 16 to prepare them for life after leaving the public education system. Life for students with disabilities after high school doesn't have great outcomes in general, so the law requires schools to start thinking about how to set students up for that transition early. Students who receive special education services can stay in school until they turn 22 years old, so between their 16th and 22nd birthdays, they have 6 years of preparation for the transition to adulthood. So there's a lot to be done in any IEP meeting, and they usually take between 40 minutes and an hour, but can run longer than that, up to 2 or 3 hours for a student with severe disabilities, or if there's a lot of disagreement between the school and the parents. Check with your special ed teacher about whether or not you should bring snacks. So, what should you do before the meeting? Make sure you have read through the child's current IEP. If you didn't already know this, let me make sure you know this now. Any professional who works with a student has a right to access the student's IEP. But it could happen that a school may not have a system in place to make those IEPs conveniently available in a timely manner. Therefore, you should feel confident about seeking out an IEP of any child that you teach. This applies to you whether you are a core content teacher, their homeroom teacher, or a specialist like music or PE teacher. Maybe you're wondering, what should I bring to the meeting? IEP meetings are a time for the team to consider data, so please bring data to the meeting. Data isn't just numbers though. The team will benefit from seeing examples and hearing your impressions about the student's progress too. Have evidence that you know about the student's preferences, interests, needs, and strengths. You should bring work samples and curriculum maps of the standards you're working on. Bring information on what the student is struggling with and any information on behavioral changes or challenges. It wouldn't hurt for you to jot down some notes about the interventions you've tried and whether they've worked or not, and information on what type of accommodations the student is using or getting across general education settings, not only your class. Don't forget to bring some way to take notes. You'll probably get some jobs out of this meeting that you don't want to forget to take care of. While you're in the meeting, you want to make sure that you always start comments with something positive about the student, even if the only positive thing you can think of is forced. That gesture goes a long way with parents and helps them know that you're not out to get their child. Providing context is important, but unless the parents are actively disagreeing that there's a problem with their child and you're trying to stage an intervention, don't dwell on the negative. Focus on what the data tell the team about solutions and supports. Something I heard that changed how I approach all people is that we all grow best through our strengths. Sure, we can remediate some of our weaknesses, but the things that are going to make us great are the things that come easily to us. So find those things in your data that are strengths and find ways to build chains of success from those strong foundations. Listen carefully to make sure that you are understanding the levels of support for the student that you're agreeing to and that you'll be able to follow through on any commitments you're making in the meeting. If you can't agree to cleaning out their backpack every day in the last 10 minutes of school while taking care of everyone else's needs at the same time, make sure you make that clear. Ask about any training or support you think you'll need to be able to follow through with anything that's being asked of you. After the meeting, follow up with your special ed teacher regularly. It's part of their job to support you in supporting the students on their caseloads. Follow through on your obligation to support collecting the data necessary to determine if the interventions being provided are helping the student meet their goals. Special ed has a much higher requirement of data-based decision-making than general education does, and SPED teachers are held to legal standards that general education teachers aren't. So be respectful of them when they pester you for the data they need you to be collecting. Because you are a legitimate member of the IEP team, you have a right to call an IEP team meeting if you believe things aren't going as it was agreed they should be in the IEP meeting. Obviously, you should bring these concerns to the SPED teacher first, but if they are unable to help you, you can tell them that you want to call an IEP meeting to discuss your concerns. Before I head into the last part of this video and share with you the final tips I have about surviving IEP meetings, I want to ask you to do me a favor. My goal with this channel is to build a community of educators who are competent, who know how to advocate for their students and for themselves, and who fight for justice. The only way for the word to spread is for these videos to get recommended to other people just like you. And the way to make that happen is for you to interact with this video through as many of these 5 ways as possible. Number 1, watch it all the way through. You're already watching, so thank you so much. Number 2, click the like button. Number 3, comment. Videos with comments get recommended more often by the YouTube algorithm. Number 4, subscribe. Channels with more subscribers get recommended more often. And 5, share this video with other people who care about the things that you care about. Thank you again so much for your support. All right, let's get back to my final 3 tips for maximizing your effectiveness in IEP meetings. Number 1, make it clear to the parents that you recognize their expert status as the parent of the student, and assert your expert status as a professional educator. Regardless of how close you think you've become to their child, it's more important that you help empower their relationship with each other than it is to make a power play about how empathetic you are and what a better listener you are and whatever. If you do your job as a teacher right, you'll be remembered fondly by the student and parent, not precipitate the collapse of their relationship. Number 2, don't take over the meeting. The special education teacher has a lot to get through and generally has a pretty short amount of time to get through it all. So don't let yourself become too much of a storyteller, especially until you and the special ed teacher start to develop an understanding of your styles. You want to play a role in the work of the team but you're not the leader of the meeting. So sit back in the cut a little bit until you get plenty of experience with these meetings. It's almost always okay to ask for clarification if there are things being said that you don't understand. You are an important part of the team, and you should feel empowered to ask questions. If you as a professional educator have questions, it's very likely that a parent could have questions too. So you might be helping clarify for the parents by asking for clarity for yourself. And finally, number 3, suggest ways that the student could be successful in general education, and don't be shy to suggest things that you could do to help the student be more successful as well. Everyone loves a good suggestion, but don't always be the one suggesting work that other people will have to do. What could you do that will support this student and make sure they feel just like one of your kids too? So thank you so much for joining me on today's video, and until next time, stay strong, stay healthy, and get some rest.